So there's no music, and actually, the music half the time doesn't work anyway. So I might just give you a video while we're waiting. Let me just see if I've got anything for you. Otherwise, we'll just jump straight in. But maybe we can remind you how long I've been speaking the truth.
And the way we live. It absolutely does.
It doesn't affect anyone.
Of course it does.
How does it affect us?
So, for example, if I was arrested today by a police officer who still had a penis but said he was a woman, he's allowed to intimately search me. Now, the reason he's allowed to intimately search me is because a transgender police officer who said he was a woman took the police to court to have that right because he said it was discriminatory
But if
for
he
him not to be
believes,
able
if he
to.
believes he's a woman, you're saying that doesn't make him a woman.
That's saying I have to indulge in that belief also, and I don't.
But when
I don't want to blow my own trumpet. Not too much anyway. But this is what happened when I met with the lovely Piers Morgan. I just want to remind you, right? It's really difficult sometimes when you're the only person or some of the only people speaking the truth. I don't want to completely blow my own trumpet, but when you speak the truth and you hold the line, isn't that hilarious, ladies, to hold the line? But when you do that, I promise you just get to be consistent, which means you get to be honest, which means you don't get to be seen as somebody who duped people into following you in order to throw it back in their faces. So it does pay off. It also means that you don't have to watch what you say. You don't have to revise what you've said. And it's just a beautiful thing. So this is what I was saying way back when.
Very strong about supporting women's rights to the point where many say that you are transphobic. Are you transphobic?
Well, I think in 2022, transphobic really just means I don't think women have penises. And so, yeah.
Anyone else not got any picture? I don't know what's going on today, but my technology is doomed at the moment. So, and I can barely see the screen because I've got new lenses. So have you, can you see me now? Because it's weird. It's really weird. So I do apologize. Okay, right. I want to talk about the incoherent position of most women's groups that operate by committee, which I think is much to their detriment. So many, or, theft, one of the two. But there is an inconsistency and incoherence which makes them dishonest. And I want you to come along with me for my little bit of logic. Right. So a main advocacy group who've set themselves up with your very generous donations. What they now say is, let's make sex clear in the Equality Act. And some of the parties have gone along with it. Why would they, do you say? Because it doesn't mean anything. That's why. It's no hard work. It's not going to be unpopular because it actually does nothing. So there's this thing of like, hey, do the thing that is nothing because it's nothing. And actually, it's going to make things easier for men to get legally recognized as women, legal women, not actual women, legal women, not trans women. No, legal women. It's just the same as trans women. So what they've done is they've created this thing where everybody is told, this is good. This is what you want. Is it what we want? We want it clarified in the law what sex means. Oh, okay. How will that impact my 11-year-old daughter going into a changing room? Well, maybe it won't, because they could still argue that it would be discriminatory. It would be disproportionate. It would not be a legitimate aim, because you're basically saying that they're raging perverts then, aren't you? It wouldn't be a legitimate aim to stop that man coming into a female-only space, even if they are getting undressed, because what that man could do, and what I would do if I was a raging pervert who wanted to go and change with little girls and women, what I would do is I would say that restricting me from going into that space as a woman as a woman, as a legally recognized woman, was somehow saying that I was a predator, which is sex discriminational. Discrimination against me as a woman, who is recognized legally as a legal woman. And I would totally argue, and I think I would win, that actually it would be discriminatory against me to be kept out of that woman-only space. Now, let's say by some freaking miracle that I'm wrong, and Single Sex and the Equality Act, meaning sex, because, for the past sort of 20 years, it's meant some ethereal concept of what a woman might be. But let's say it is recognized as sex. When do you reckon you could actually exclude men? What would be the point of a GRC? Because it says it has to be proportionate. And if these men are legally women, I want you to think about now, when would you be able to exclude those men? What would be good enough? Single sex hospital ward, would that be good enough? Because Starmer's talking about side wards, because you know how many private little side wards there are for, if you just had a baby and you're really, really unwell after you've just had a baby and you really, really are desperate for sleep, when they put you in that side ward free of charge, remember? Do you remember? No, me neither. I had to pay for mine every single time. So Keir Starmer, that's what he's saying. The Tories have let this go under. I couldn't believe a single word the Conservatives say on much these days, because they are, as far as I'm concerned, they're just trying to win an election that they definitely are going to lose. So they're saying anything, knowing that they probably don't have to stick to anything. And then you've got the Greens. They're nuts. They would accept that legal women are women for all issues. So I just keep going back to, what is the point of a GRC? What is the point of the Gender Recognition Act? And in what way has it ever benefit women? Ever benefit any women whatsoever? So let's think of some places where there's just women's groups. Girl Guides. Is it a legitimate and proportionate aim to stop a man dressing as a woman, who calls himself a woman, who's legally recognized as a woman? Is there a legitimate and proportionate aim of the single sex space that would exclude a man with a GRC? Absolutely no, there is not. Not the way it operates. Like you and I'm pretty sure all of us would say, actually, he's not a woman. He shouldn't be in there. He's not a woman. That isn't what legal sex is. That is not what organizations such as Sex Matters would argue either. Because they argue for the protection of trans individuals and legal sex. And they don't want any discrimination against those men. And what does that freaking mean? What does discrimination against those men means? It means that we recognize that they are men and they are not women. That's what that discrimination means. We recognize they are men and not women. I recognize they have a fetish. So this is what it is. This is why the incoherence of that argument means that they're all lying. It's basically just about getting their comfortable shoes underneath a big fat table with some pseudo-important people. Because it's, in order to stick to your absolute aims and get to the place where you want to be, which is pre-2004 for women and girls, right? We want pre-2004. In order to do that, you have to be unpopular. Otherwise, you're not really doing it right. You should be unpopular with the establishment and the people that have discarded our views for the last, and our rights and our safety. If you're not unpopular with the establishment, you're part of the establishment, most likely, or you want to be. It's no mistake that people who were in think tanks, who had working relationships with the government, I'm sure, think tanks, or in certain elements of the Foreign Office, or different parts of government, or like just these professional class people that have always not really, truly done anything remotely courageous. That means that they lose favor with the establishment. It's It's really difficult because I like these people. I don't want to criticize these people. I really do like them. I could sit down in the pub and have a ginger beer with them. I really like them a lot. And so it's a difficult thing to finally realize that not one of them has the courage to genuinely stand up for women, and face being unpopular. So if you criticize a man, like, why can't a gynecologist, like, if you accept there are legal women, right? And you accept that those people should be protected from discrimination, why can't a gynecologist who identifies as a woman, who's legally recognized as a woman, why can't he treat patients with your logic? Like, why can't he? Why should you be able to suggest that he's doing something untoward? If he's legally a woman, would it be a legitimate and proportionate aim of single sex in that relationship between a woman and her gynecologist, with the existence of legal women? Can you genuinely say that that man is not allowed to insert his grubby little hands and his grubby little gloves inside a woman's vagina? Like, why can you? Why can you say that? Like, what would be the legitimate aim or proportion of that? Why can you discriminate against that man in that situation without saying he's a pervert? Without saying he gets turned on by it? Like, he can say it, but then you have to prove that he's only saying that because he's a man. And then you admit that he's not a woman. Also, with the Gender Recognition Act, you can't even fucking ask him. It's against the law to ask to see whether or not he's... So if he comes if he starts in your hospital and he says he's a woman and he's a gynecologist and he says he's a woman, you can't ask him if he's a woman. You can't ask him for a certificate. Like, this is why I'm telling you, if it doesn't feel like it makes sense, it's probably a lie. If a man comes in the hospital and he wants to go in a ward and he says his name is Janet and you just have his word, like, let's say you can't find his records. Let's say he's visiting from the United States of America and he goes in that female ward. You're not allowed to ask him because you're discriminating. So you can make it as clear as you freaking well like. You can make every single word in the Equality Act clear, although you won't be able to, because what does gender or gender reassignment mean? What does gender actually even mean? What does gender reassignment mean? What does changing one's gender mean? What does gender in a gender recognition certificate mean? How do those two things interplay? How can it ever make any sense? Let's say you make it clear. When is it, without it being discrimination, when is it that a woman would be allowed to exclude a man who calls himself a woman? Would she be able to exclude a man who calls himself a woman if she is a masseuse running doing home visits, and she says, no, I can't come to you because you're not really a woman? Is she at risk of being sued? Is that a legitimate and proportionate aim of whatever she's doing, to refuse to go and see a man in his own home who calls himself a woman, who is legally recognized as a woman? This is just... It doesn't make any sense. Beyond saving one's skin, beyond still being invited to slip your comfortable shoes and your twin set at the nice little table full of nice people, having nice committee meetings and nice lunches and nice little in-club, in-group WhatsApp groups. Besides that, what is it doing? I just don't get it. I have thought long and hard about what good making sex in the Equality Act does. What good does it do? It's about as good as the 100,000 people spent on changing one sentence in the census. I don't think it does anything whatsoever, Because if you're already not using the Equality Act and you and you think it's because it's not clear what biological sex means or what sex means, then you're already lost. You're not going to use it properly anyway. So, like, this is just my figuring here. And somebody said, I'm going to raise you because I can read some comments, but not if there's too much text. Why can't women on the same side sit at the table and work this out? Disgraceful. I'm never invited to the table. Nobody wants to be at the same table as me because it makes a mockery of whatever half-ass thing that they're doing. And I don't look. I know that it's uncomfortable sometimes. I'm so terribly confident. And I know that makes some women uncomfortable. I know that probably makes me a little bit brash. But if I had a penis saying this sort of stuff, you'd all be, "Woo, she's great. He's great, isn't he great? He's so strong. He really knows his own mind." But and I know it's a kind of it's an ironic thing that I have this face with this much makeup and this peroxide hair and silly nails, and I dress so feminine, and then I have the audacity not to act submissive. But this is just what I'm talking about. This is what doesn't make sense to me. This is why I think it's really dangerous. This is kind of that sort of activism which tells you they've solved everything while doing nothing, making no difference whatsoever to whether or not most of us can go about our lives. I think that is gaslighting. And I think it's really dangerous. And I think what might happen is that people think that that is the go-to, that is the de facto kind of, yeah, let's make it clear. What for? So you can have a victory that means nothing, that changes nothing, that you can have a little victory. Is that what you mean? Because it is not because sex is clear or not clear in the Equality Act that men are getting their penises out in women-only spaces. That's not why. It's not because people didn't, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, in our rape crisis shelter, oh, I don't know. I think we have to let them in. I think we have to." That's not why men are in those spaces. It's because too many women think that they can just let those men in and think they can make a judgment call that clearly they have no business doing. That's why. It's got absolutely nothing to do with a freaking word in the Equality Act or how people think of it. Maybe there should be extreme punishment meted out by the government to people that don't adhere to single sex spaces, but that's not going to happen, and it's certainly not going to happen with the Labour government. So I'm just saying, look, it's easy to spot. It's easy to spot someone who wants to go against your rights, who basically tells you, looks you in the eye and says, "I'm going to take your rights. I want men to have your rights." It's very different if somebody says, "Hey, we're going to do this. It's a fantastic solution. If we just get this, we can do this." And actually, that thing that they're after won't make a blind bit of difference. And certainly not when Labour get in, but it won't make a blind bit of difference anyway. It won't make a difference to whether or not you can have your knitting circle. Like, why would you be able to stop a man coming to an over 65s aquafit if he calls himself a woman? What would be the legitimate reason to keep him out? Because the fact that there are exceptions in the Equality Act means even when they drafted that legislation, they know that these men are not women. Okay? But they inserted it so it's unclear whether or not you can exclude those men. So it's all incoherent, which means it's absolutely that there's nobody that wrote that law. There's nobody that inserted that law, that part, gender reassignment or Equality Act, single sex exempt. There is no one that wrote those laws or went anywhere near those laws that doesn't think, or rather that does think a man can be a woman, because they wouldn't have put an exception in there if they meant it. But also putting gender reassignment in there meant that you weren't really to know. And you're not allowed to know. They're allowed to know. You're not allowed to know. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the incoherence of law. This is not how we all live. We just want to keep men out of women-only spaces. We don't care how they identify. And I am sick and tired of being told that while the dog is pissing on my leg, that it's raining. So just be mindful that you keep being told that these things are solutions, and they are absolutely nothing of the sort. They will not solve a damn thing. They will not change a damn thing. They won't. It will not change. Men going into, I mean, there's that case in Brighton where she's advocating for women's services have one women's session that excludes these men. Like, it's just so, I don't know whether it's a left thing. I don't know whether it's a buddy thing. I don't know whether it's because everyone wants to stay friends with each other and they've got no gumption or no guts when it comes to this. I don't know whether it's because, like I said, they genuinely just want to keep their comfortable shoes under the table. I have no idea why it is. But it is all bullshit. I do know that. I do know it doesn't make sense. I do know it sounds dishonest. I do know that nothing will change. I do know that if you fight in court to have one service that's just for female survivors only, that you leave all other women's services and you make it legally binding that it's okay to have mixed services for women that are called women only. Like, I do know that. I do know that outcome is probably worse than anything else. I do know that the Forstater ruling that basically called what we think a belief, and this whole Granger stuff and all these like clever legal stuff, I do know that it leaves me feeling like I am being gaslit. I do know that biological sex is absolutely not a belief. Gravity is not a belief system. You can't fight it. You can't fight in a court of law and say gravity is a belief system. You can't hold somebody under the water and say, I believed while I was holding them under the water, I believed they could have access to air. You can't do that. But apparently now we've had it clarified in law that knowing that we women don't have penises and knowing that biological sex exists is a belief system we're allowed to hold. Well, thanks very much. Thanks so much. That makes me feel so great. If anything, it should have just been an absence of belief in the cult. Anyway, I know it's uncomfortable. Like I said, I really like everyone involved. I really do. I find them entertaining. I like them. I just think the power of being invited into inner circles and the cliquey clubs, I think the power of that, and to stay in and to all agree with all your friends. And when you have committees, let's face it, you're always going to have someone's a bit true trans, aren't you? And I think that sort of collectivism, and I think you always lose focus of what your genuine goal is. And I don't know whether their genuine goal was ever the same as mine, as repealing the GRA, as going back to sort of pre-2004, of ensuring that we recognize that these men have a fetish, of losing the notion of gender dysphoria, and all of those things that go along with it. I do know that there are a lot of women that keep talking about from the other side of their mouths, where they basically totally discount all those things, and they talk about that we can do something else, and it's too difficult to do the hard stuff. And then I remember before the GRA, there was a time when men didn't legally get recognized as women, and I don't see why we can't go back to that. Okay. Look, much love to you. It's always a hard thing when I have to come and say things that go very much against everybody else's grain, but I do think that now is not the time to compromise. Now that we're getting the ear of everyone, and let me just say, you will be told the only reason people started listening is we offered them. No, that's bullshit. That's not true. The reason people are listening is because, frankly, people with my view have been listened to, and we are pulling everyone kicking and screaming along this way. And by we, I mean you. So we are pulling everyone this way. The general public already agrees with us. They just don't know it's an issue. And they don't know that how much they couldn't give a shit about women. Most people have no idea how women moaning about stuff is women whining and moaning, and it's not really that we're feeling unsafe. We're just making a fuss about nothing. So, I hope that is a little bit clearer. I'll see you later.